Well, these so-called renewable energy zones, as we've spoken about before, they were just drawn up on whiteboards in offices in Sydney with no reference at all to the people whose lives would be transformed by this, or to the loss of wildlife habitat, the loss of farmland, the loss of amenity for people here in this beautiful part of the world. This is the town of Armidale. It's about 800 metres above sea level. It's a little bit chilly even for spring, but this animated graphic put together by Steve Nowakowski shows you exactly what they're in for here. There've been more than 80 projects, 80 projects, since the renewable energy zone was announced in 2019. They include wind turbine developments, massive industrial scale solar panels, battery storage, and hundreds of kilometres of new 550 kilovolt transmission line. All up, there are plans for some 2,000 wind turbines, and we're talking the big ones here, the 6 and 7 megawatt wind turbines, which stretch up to 300 metres tall. That's higher than the Crown Casino building in Sydney. Associated with this will be many hundreds of kilometres of new roads. These are 6 metres wide on average, wide enough to carry the heavy vehicles that are required to bring in the concrete, the water, and the turbine blades themselves, which is a major operation as we've shown you before. This in itself will put pressure on the community, hundreds of heavy vehicle truck movements a day per project during the construction phase. This is a side of renewable energy, of course, you never get told about. It's land clearing on an unbelievable scale, much of it on native vegetation, remnant bushland up there on the Great Dividing Range, places that have been out of reach for farmers for more than 200 years, but now are being cleared in the name of renewable energy. The turbine components themselves are called non-recyclable. There's the turbine blades, no way of recycling those. They just lie in the ground and crumble once they reach the end of their useful life, which is about 15 to 20 years. Last week we took you to a solar panel development up there near Gympie in Queensland, which had been destroyed by hailstones and then replaced. All that just goes into landfill, and the estimated life of those solar panels, again, 15 to 20 years. It's an enormously short-sighted policy. It doesn't take any account of future needs beyond 15 to 20 years' time. Nuclear, on the other hand, which we've spoken about before in this program, modern nuclear developments, pressurized water reactors, have a life of an estimated 80 years minimum. Some are talking about 100 years. We are talking about planning energy right into the next century. No wonder it's actually cheaper in the long run when you look at it, because once you've paid off the cost of those, which is heavy, there is a heavy upfront cost, then you run energy very cheaply, as they find in America and in Europe, where some of these nuclear power stations have been operating for more than 40 years. Nuclear energy is back in a big way in the United States. The US Department of Energy has mapped out more than 100 sites across the country. These are former coal-fired power stations and existing nuclear power plants where they say are suitable for new nuclear development. The US Department of Energy issued a report this week to show that nuclear was far cheaper than renewable energy alone, and of course it gets the job done. This is what firms like Microsoft are learning. Microsoft 5 years ago were all in for renewable energy, for wind and solar, but they've come to realize that they will not be able to provide the huge quantities of energy that they need, the huge quantities of electricity to power the data centers and the processing centers that are needed for applications like AI. That's why Microsoft has signed 2 deals already to take large amounts of electricity from nuclear power stations, one in which involves opening the notorious 3 Mile Island nuclear power station there in Pennsylvania. I say notorious because, well, that's what The Guardian calls it, but as we know, nobody died in the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident, and there have been no cases that have been proven of even nuclear contamination. It was a nuclear accident that shouldn't have happened, but the valve was shut down and the place was made safe again. And the nuclear reactor is about to reopen courtesy of Microsoft. It makes our debate here seem pretty strange. We're in a pretty strange world under this government that continues to insist against all the evidence that renewable energy is cheaper. The proof of that, of course, is in your electricity bill, and I doubt if you've noticed any improvement in that recently. But the big cost with renewable energy is on our wildlife and our native bushland. This is irreplaceable. This countryside that you're looking at here, up there on the Great Dividing Range here in the New England Tableland, that's been untouched ever since humans came to this continent, virtually untouched because it's too difficult to farm. But it's here on these high elevation outcrops on the Great Dividing Range, right the way up the Great Dividing Range, that they're placing these giant turbine factories. As we've seen in places like Caban in far north Queensland, the destruction of the landscape, the felling of half a hill in the case of Caban to build access roads and turbine pads is just disgraceful. They talk about farmers. The big fuss at the moment from the EU is that Australian farmers are apparently irresponsibly clearing land to graze cattle, but the big land clearing pressure in this country right now comes from renewable energy within these renewable energy zones. Renewable energy, as we know, is land hungry. It needs plenty of land to produce very small amounts of electricity, and that in turn needs transmission lines to connect it up. It really is a ridiculous way to go, and I've come to the conclusion that we just have to stop right now. Let's just draw a halt to any more renewable energy development while we take stock and think, is there a better way to do this? I think you know the answer to that. This area is about 20 kilometres outside of Armidale. It's the site for the giant Burralong wind turbine development, which is going to take an area of land more than twice the size of the city of Armidale. Just think of it. All this for 100 or so turbines. But this is beautiful countryside, much of it farmland, and much of it lovingly restored by koala lovers. They've built a huge koala corridor through here, stretching for more than 50 kilometres, because it's important with koalas that they don't sit in isolated pockets, but they're able to roam free. They have a koala sanctuary here. They've been volunteers are looking after koalas 24 hours a day, and yet this great corridor is going to be broken up by these access roads for wind turbines, under plans being put forward by Squadron Energy. That's the company owned by Andrew Forrest. I've been astounded how little fuss there's been over the fate of the endangered koala. They put on the endangered list only 2 years ago, but we have an environment minister, a federal environment minister, Tanya Plibersek, who is signing off on proposals that will authorise the destruction of hundreds of thousands of hectares of koala habitat in Queensland, and even more here in New South Wales. The Burralong wind turbine development under Forest's Squadron Energy, that will cut swathes across koala habitat in the New England countryside, some of it farmland, some of it native vegetation. But local koala lovers have gone to a lot of trouble to build a koala corridor, to plant new trees, to link up areas of existing trees, to give the koalas basically 50 kilometres or more of tree route that they can use in safety, with safe crossing points well marked on the road for koalas. This is going to be sliced up by the new Burralong wind turbine development. It'll be chopped and chopped again by these huge access roads that go through the countryside to put these wind turbines in place. And these access roads, of course, are left there permanently. They're not revegetated. How many and where? Well, we don't know, because the plans for these are so opaque. It's so hard to get hold of them and to find out where exactly these turbines are going and where the access roads are going. But we know from the experience in Queensland that there will be lots of them. There'll be dozens of kilometres minimum per wind turbine development. And these, as I say, are 6 metres wide. They're heavy duty roads because they have to take these enormous B doubles carrying concrete, rubble, cement, water onto the site to construct these turbines. Naturally, this has left the koala-loving population of New England heartbroken. Trinity Hooper is a volunteer for the Kindly Koala Sanctuary, and I spoke to her about her feelings about this development.
So Kindly Animal Sanctuary has been trying to plant as many koala-friendly trees as possible in this area to join critical koala corridors and koala habitat together. So earlier this year we planted 7,500 koala-friendly trees on the Kindly Sanctuary, and we have other neighbours and nearby property owners doing similar projects to try and join all of this critical habitat together.
And it's going to be a long corridor, is it, about 50 kilometres or so?
Yes, it's going to be very long, and that's just this particular corridor. When it joins up with the others, it will be even longer.
And tell me about the wind turbine project and what that'll do to it.
It will destroy all of this habitat. It will take out thousands upon thousands of trees, and koalas just won't have anywhere to live or anything to eat. They're already struggling enough on the endangered list.
It's only 2 years since they were put on the endangered list or thereabouts. Does it surprise you that the Minister for the Environment can approve the destruction of koala habitat?
Yes, I was absolutely surprised. My understanding was always that if a huge project was planned for somewhere that an endangered species was living, that would put an immediate end to the project.
Yeah, you've seen up in Queensland in particular, huge areas, up to 500 hectares of koala habitat in some cases, just destroyed.
Yes, it does not seem to matter if animals are on the endangered, critically endangered or vulnerable list. They just continue their projects as planned.
Before this occurred in your area, what was your attitude towards renewable energy?
I was for it, like everything you read, not in regards to wildlife and destroying habitat, sounds very good with renewable energy, but the reality is that it takes out so much habitat, it kills so much wildlife, and it's not just koalas, it's frogs, it's bats, it's birds, eagles. We've got huge eagles' nests in trees here that are right in the middle of where they're going to put these turbines.
People in the city don't really understand this, do they?
No, everyone here is renewable and thinks it's fantastic and it's green, and the sad truth is there's absolutely nothing green about it. It's destroying.
It's green before they start, and then
and then
I know you're not happy about it either, are you?
Why are you doing this? You be a good girl. You be a good girl. Do you want a snack? You see someone with a snack?
What do you think your chances are of stopping it?
My hopes are very high, but it is an uphill battle for sure.
And it's expensive, isn't it? And takes your time that you don't have.
Yes, they have huge bigwigs sitting in offices. I'm sure they have a huge legal team. They have money. None of us have any of that. We're just expected to fight it on our own.
Also in this area, these turbines are eating up thousands of hectares of arable land, some of the best grazing country in the country, famed for its beef, famed for its wagyu, and the farmers are none too happy by this.
I've got 800 hectares here, Nick.
Beautiful country.
It's a beautiful spot. It's basalt soil, 32 to 34 inch rainfall, and 1100 metres of elevation. So it's terrific cattle country, sheep country. Yeah, it's really good land.
It seems just nuts to give up country like this to wind turbines.
Well, that decision's been taken out of our hands, but we certainly think that as a community, and I'm chairman of the Burralong community group, batting for Burralong, which is trying to find a pathway forward for these sort of projects. But there's certainly a question to be asked about the location of some of these projects. There's certainly places on the New England where projects probably would fit, but then there's certainly places that are meeting a lot of opposition, and with the government trying to grease the wheel, so to speak, are just trying to push these projects through without any community consultation, or not enough, and certainly if they do consultation, they're not listening, or zero social licence. They may well have the hosts of the project's acceptance, but certainly no one else.
Right now, you've got the European Union threatening not to buy Australian beef because Australian farmers are clearing land, supposedly, and yet here you are, a farmer, fighting against a massive land clearing project.
Well, exactly. Yeah, there's a fair few of us planting trees, if anything. We've got 2 tree planting programs on the go here at the moment. Some of the the land clearing they talk about is cleared land that is revegetating, that they may well be trying to maintain pasture and production on, but wholesale clearing of native timbered land, I don't think you can hold farmers to account for that, because we've got to tick a lot of boxes to start clearing land. But these guys don't seem to be, particularly in Queensland, from what we're seeing, that certainly native vegetation is being cleared up there at
huge
a great
amounts, massive amounts.
Yeah, no, it's pretty concerning to just try and greenwash these projects to make us accept them no matter the cost, and that communities are pushing back. They're not going to do that.
You've got your work cut out just running your business. How do you find time to deal with all the meetings and all the other stuff you have to go to try and fight this wind turbine project?
Well, it's just eating into our family time more than our business time. Our businesses still need to run and try and be profitable. We call any meetings we have as after working hours, so to speak, so there's just less time with our families. I think that if these companies are fair income, my family is involved with the resource industries in the north with land similar to this, similar situation, but with coal mines and gas and water, and we were paid for our time in any meetings we held back then, and that was 20 years ago. We are being accused of being anti-climate change, anti-green, anti-everything, because we don't just agree to everything they ask for. When in reality, they're the exact same investors, they're the same resource companies rebranded as renewable energy. We know that. Origin Energy, you name them. Squadron, they're all miners at heart. They've all made plenty of money out of old school coal, iron ore, whatever, gas. So now they've rebranded themselves as renewable, and we're just supposed to accept everything they say. They're just, it's just the communities are pushing back. They're just not going to accept that.
Do you think you'll win?
Well, look, I don't think there's going to be a yes and no, win or loss situation here. We've just got to try and make, I think even the conservative side of politics have said that there needs to be a mixture. It doesn't need to be all renewable. We're not saying it needs to all be coal. We're not saying it all needs to be nuclear. We're saying we need to very carefully consider this. By doing what this current state and federal governments are doing, of it's all going to be renewable, you have to rebuild the entire network. It will break this country. It will absolutely break this country. And then to try and get it into the speed they're getting, they're putting out new planning laws, they're putting out new renewable energy guidelines, and then, as we've seen with Hills of Gold, just completely ignoring their own guidelines have just released, and then just pushing stuff through so fast because they've set themselves a ridiculous timeline that just can't be met, and then we're the ones that are supposed to accept that and shoulder it. Communities have had enough, and I think wider Australia are starting to wake up. I think they really are.
I think that's right. I think they're going to wake up at this next election. Certainly, I don't think there'll be too many people going to be voting for Labor around here.
No, we're the New England's fairly staunch, but in saying that, we were probably let down by certain people that represented our area at a state level. I think it's pretty disappointing that the size of the res that was agreed to, I don't think that was considered. An 8 gigawatt res needs 14 gigawatts of generation. 14 gigawatts of generation is 10 million solar panels and 2,000 turbines on a very small area. So whoever agreed to that hadn't done the numbers, hadn't pulled the calculator out, as far as I'm concerned. And there's big pushback now.
Good luck.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Tony. Well, this renewable energy zone madness will have an effect on voting. We know that already because a few weeks ago in the New South Wales local government elections, we saw councils in this area turned on this one issue, renewable energy. Rachel Grigg is one of the people who was elected, and I spoke to her. You stood for council here, first time for Walker Council.
It is the first time that I have stood for council, and certainly the renewable transition in Walker is what motivated me to stand. I guess I wasn't really satisfied that the council was doing enough to represent the community and to protect its own assets.
So here, not just here but in other councils in the renewable energy zone, it seems to me that the issue of the renewable transition played a big part in the result. Would you say that's true?
I think so. I'm sure that I received a lot of support because of my position, and I was always very clear about what my position was, which was a bit strange in the campaign because a lot of people probably didn't. They weren't prepared to say where they stood, and I do think I got a lot of support.
In a moment I'll be taking you to the community forum here in Armidale where the issue of renewables is being hotly debated. That's coming up in a moment on Reality Bites.